I'm William Andreessen, host of Speaking with Students, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows in the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Sheila Robitaille. She is a veteran educator who is now a professional development manager with 3P Learning. Our focus is on gamification and learning. So much to learn, so much to share. Thanks for listening. Oh, by the way, before you go, it'd be so cool if you took a minute to help out the podcast. And you're asking, how could I do that? Well, here are a couple ways. One, you could tell a friend and share links. Two, you could go to my website and leave a review and subscribe. And three, how about click on the link on my website homepage where it says, buy me a coffee. By doing this, you could donate $1 or $2 or $5 or more, whatever you feel like, to help me address the costs associated with producing the podcast. That'd be so cool. Thanks so much. You are awesome. Enjoy the show.
Another thing that he built into the experiment was, randomly, some of the participants were given activity instructions that and the activity that would take away 5 points every time they got it wrong. So for every time they got it wrong, they lost 5 random, not important points. And the other half of the group didn't lose points. They just got encouragement to say, hey, try it again. And what came out of that was the participants who were facing the loss of points, they succeeded in the activity at a rate of about 52%. And those who didn't have points taken away from them, they succeeded at about 68%, which is statistically significant.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Milletto. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. With Dr. Steve Milletto.
Sheila Robitaille is a veteran educator. In her nearly 30 years in the education sector, she has served as a classroom teacher, magnet school coordinator, technology integration specialist, professional development specialist, director of innovation and learning, and school principal. Currently, she is a professional development manager with 3P Learning, where she develops and delivers professional learning sessions to teachers and administrators who are new to or are honing their skills with reading eggs and the other solutions provided by 3P Learning. Sheila's vision for professional development for 3P Learning is that teachers leave their sessions having been trained in the solution, but even more importantly, having grown pedagogically. She is passionate about helping teachers innovate and build their professional repertoire of tools that will ensure student success. Sheila, it's awesome to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me, and say hi to everyone.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Milletto. It is a complete honor to be on your wonderful show. And of course, hello, everyone. I certainly hope that you'll find bits and pieces of this session interesting.
I think they will definitely find it interesting, and appreciate you being here. And so let's start this. Tell us a little bit about your background and your role at 3P Learning. So how about let's start as a teacher. What do you like about teaching?
If someone had told me before I went into education that I was going to be a teacher, I would have laughed at them. That was the last thing that I wanted to do. In a previous life, not really, but prior to going into education, I actually have a degree in psychology and I was in social work. And I spent some time working with emotionally disturbed teens. I also spent some time working with adult substance abusers. And I was struck by how many of their stories actually began with something that happened in the classroom or something that a teacher had said that really stuck with them. I'm not blaming teachers for, all the problems in the world and that sort of thing, but it really struck me how impactful teachers can be. And so, I decided that I wanted to, number one, I wanted to work with some pre-diagnosed children. And, I was really, really looking forward to having, a positive impact on students. So that's what led me into teaching. I went from the social work sector, I went into an alternative certification program and then went into the classroom from there.
Awesome. Appreciate it. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what you do at 3P Learning now. So So tell us a little bit more about your focus and what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, for me personally, going into the role was a great marriage of my two loves, which are of professional development and of course education and educational technology. All throughout my teaching career just seemed to follow me. It seemed to be something that I was looked at as an innovator, as a first adopter, as someone who successfully integrated technologies. And so it all kind of made sense, right? And so now my role is to develop and help deliver professional learning. I also manage a team of consultants who do the same sort of thing. All of us are educators. And we really at 3P, we don't want to just do training. We want to help teachers. It's a very difficult job, and we all know this firsthand. We want to help teachers be able to, utilize our programs in ways that are helpful to them, and of course also help, build them up pedagogically.
Appreciate you sharing. One of the things that I want to make sure that I share with everybody is we're going to get into a discussion about how gamified learning is changing the reading landscape in K through 12. And so my next question has to do with getting to gamification. So how do you define gamification in the context of education? And what are, at its core, what are those principles that you guys are looking at?
Well, the dictionary definition of gamification in education is, something along the lines of the use of game features or game operations and concepts in education. And it's all about making learning more fun and engaging. Gamification is including rewards, competition, achievement, acknowledgement, and self-tracking into instructional content, making it fun and an interactive experience. But it's also a way of removing the fear of failure and replacing it with the principles that help develop that growth mindset in students. And I could talk all day about the growth mindset as well. But something that really inspired me, I am completely in love with the TED Talk called the Super Mario Effect. In it, Mark Rober describes an experiment. Now, he was a science teacher and engineer and that sort of thing. And he has, YouTube followers, and he put out kind of a challenge to his followers, 50,000 followers. And basically he said it was to show that everyone could learn to code. And so he put this activity out where participants would have to use some really basic coding language to move a car in a maze, basically. And so lots and lots and lots of people participated in that. And what he was really doing, he didn't really care whether people learned how to code or not. What it was really looking at was how much more could people do, could students do, could people in general do if they weren't concerned about failure. The results of his experiment was that, another thing that he built into the experiment was randomly, some of the participants were given activity instructions that, and the activity that would take away 5 points every time they got it wrong. So for every time they got it wrong, they lost 5 random, not important points. And the other half of the group didn't lose points. They just got encouragement to say, hey, try it again. And what came out of that was the participants who were facing the loss of points, they succeeded in the activity at a rate of about 52%. And those who didn't have points taken away from them, they succeeded at about 68%, which is statistically significant. But what's even more interesting than that was that those participants who were losing points, they averaged trying again 5 times, whereas those who weren't worried about losing points, they averaged 12 attempts. And so obviously they had more success because they had more resilience because they kept trying it. And then he poses a question, what if you just framed the learning process in such a way that you didn't concern yourself with failure? How much more successful could you be? How much more could you learn? And then he went on to tell some personal stories. Like, for instance, he says, so I started thinking about this in terms of, real world. And he thought about his toddler son, who was learning to walk. And his son never concerned himself about if he fell or, how looking silly or that sort of thing. And they, of course, didn't punish him for falling as he was learning to walk. They just celebrated when he would take a step or two, right? And then he said, and another example would be, when he was, in the 80s, back in the day, Super Mario, and that's why he called this the Super Mario effect. And he talked about how he and his friends, when they were playing this game, they would go to school and they'd say, okay, did you beat Bowser? How far did you get? And that sort of thing. And when they fell in a pit or when the turtle, smashed them or whatever, they didn't say, oh, well, I'm not good at this. I just want to give up. They internalize, oh, okay, well, I didn't notice there was a pit there. So the next time I need to do this, I need to jump a little faster, or I need to do. So in other words, they were learning along the way. And ultimately their success came from not worrying about the failures. They weren't failures. They were just ways for them to continue to learn and to become successful. So I love the way that he talks about Super Mario or gamification in learning being about not being focused on the failures, and that gamification of learning makes it feel natural to want to try again.
That's awesome. I love it. And so having been finishing up high school as the 80s were beginning and going into college eras of the age of the arcade, from the 70s and the 80s. And, it's funny because there were some games that were just so difficult to master. And I always, you always wonder how someone got to that level. So I'm going to use a game's name. I'm not sponsored by any of these companies
or Super Mario
or Super Mario, but but if they're listening, anyway, but there was a game called Defender, and it had the ship. Yes. And and you could reverse which direction you're going, and you're trying to stop these aliens from stealing the gas tanks and stuff like this that powered this moon station or something like that. And oh my gosh! And you had this special missile that would destroy everything on the screen in case you got in trouble, because suddenly you'd be surrounded by everybody, and you're firing these missiles, and you're going up and down. You could reverse and go back, and it was amazing how many times you just suddenly would panic. You'd hit there was also a hyperspace button, so it would make you appear someplace, right? And you'd appear someplace else, and all of a sudden you'd blow up or something like this. And what was cool was one time I was in an arcade and I'm watching a friend of mine do all this stuff, and he was so good at that thing, and he had created extra lives, like 100 of them. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like once in a while I might get one, but that. Going with what you're talking about, that 100 ships that I had the opportunity then, because he said, I got to go. You want to take over for me? And I said, that'd be awesome. And so I didn't have to put in that many quarters. I just got to play until the 100 ships were gone. And you got so much further along and around, past things, learning what was the secret things that you could do and stuff like that. And it's just like in Super Mario, when a friend of mine showed me, so now we're not in the arcade, we're at home and stuff like this. When a friend of mine showed me that there's areas where you could make a vine appear, and you climb up the vine and you're in a new level and all this stuff, and you didn't have to deal with all that nonsense that constantly floored you in the next section or something like this. And all that came from not being punished. You had to figure out how to create your extra lives and learn from it and move on. And I love that connection like that, because when you experience that thought that, because you're not so experimental when you're doing a paper and you lose 10 points because you're experimenting with the thought. And I like that. That's a good analogy, especially for the modern world, because I got to tell you, today there's too many buttons and all kinds of things that you can do, make the, I'm just but I think if I spent more time with it without being punished, I think I would fit right back into that scenario again. So,
Exactly.
but I love that. Good stuff.
And it was super inspiring to me, and really made sense of gamification of learning to me.
Oh, that's nice because and especially because kids are very used to that type of experiment and figure out
Absolutely.
and figure out how to survive and don't give up, keep moving on, instead of getting
Well,
punished for giving it.
and can you imagine if you had got kids to attack everything in education the way they attack their video games? Um, can you imagine how
Oh
far
yeah,
they would go?
that would be cool. There's some that would be so engaged and so enthralled with what you're doing.
And it's not just kids though, it's adults as well. I mean, you know, if I'm going to an educational, or if I'm in a setting where I'm learning as well, if somebody engages us in gamified play, or a challenge in some way, especially one where I can risk and not fear failure, heck yeah, I'm into it. I do PD sessions, obviously with adults, and certainly with our sales team and things like that. And the sellers, they know I generally am coming with something like that, but they love it when I pull out a Kahoot, or something where they can and they're not so worried about, oh, did I not get the answer right or whatever. It's just the challenge, and it's just continuing to play. So it's not just a kid thing. That Gamification is an effective way to learn.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how gamified and the learning platforms that you're talking about work a little bit. So one of them's, you have Reading Eggs. By the way, unique name right there. I can't wait to hear a little bit more about that. Can you talk about how it engages students differently compared to traditional reading instruction?
Well, along the lines of kind of what we've been talking, students have always, I'm sorry, teachers have always looked for ways to keep students interested and engaged in the learning. I mean, that's the biggest, task as the teacher. And usually it's by using games or novelty of instruction that we have the most success. Students today are digital natives, and they expect technology to be present in most aspects of their lives, including education. And gamified learning, with its motivational aspects, both intrinsic and extrinsic, just holds students' attention and keeps them working. And just like that Super Mario experiment, students don't need to worry about failure. They only earn rewards. However, I would also argue that gamified learning platforms, digital learning platforms, are possibly as beneficial to teachers as they are to students. Students are engaged, students are staying with it, students are motivated. But these platforms, such as Reading Eggs, one of the programs that we have, allow teachers to easily provide differentiated content to their learners. I mean, face it, these days, teachers are looking at 30 kids, and there is such a wide gamut of ability levels and backgrounds and things like that. And then they have to find a way to differentiate content for each one of those learners and reach all of those learners where they are. And these gamified digital programs allow teachers to provide differentiated content to their learners, and also provides that instant data that enables them to make those informed decisions about where to take the teaching and learning next. As an example, like in Reading Eggs, when the students go in, there are actually 4 solutions inside of Reading Eggs, the package. For each one of those solutions, students take a placement test that places them in their zone of proximal development. And every student may be at a different spot depending on what they're bringing to the table when they come in. And then there's very specific sequencing and spiraling, so that there's scaffolding, and students are learning along the way, and so they start where they are and they're learning along the way, and it's all very natural and very specific. There's spiraling as well, so there's constant review going on. And then there's explicit teaching of things that we're not really talking about the science of reading in this session, but the science of reading says that we can't leave out certain parts of what used to be called the reading wars in the past, whether it's phonics or whether it's other word attack strategies. And the instruction needs to be explicit, not just happenstance, not just, if a moment arises. And so all of that is built into Reading Eggs. So you've got all the things that we've just been talking about in terms of the benefit of gamified learning, in that kids want to do it. They want to be engaged with it. And then you've got all of the other tools that really, in many ways, help teachers just be magicians when it comes to differentiation. And that's, it's one of the toughest asks for teachers, is to make sure that they're meeting every student where they are.
That's awesome. I love it. That's, and there is something just so exciting about, when you can have a little bit of success, and then you realize that you could keep going at this challenge that is a game of some sort, but that it's actually expanding your view of whatever it is you're trying to learn. And that's and as a teacher, to see someone being successful that way also is exciting. So,
well, I think it's also important that, now I'll put on my psychology hat. When it talks about reinforcement, when it talks about motivation and behaviors that you want repeated, reinforcement requires two features in order to be successful. It requires that it's something that the student wants to work for. If you put a carrot out in front of a kid that they don't care about, well, then your incentive program kind of falls. And it has to be at the right schedule of reinforcement. You can't have a kindergarten student wait as long as a grade 6 student for the reinforcement. Now, some grade 6 teachers might say, no, it's about the same as with kindergarten, but that's a whole other point. And so these programs also meet that, because like in Reading Eggs, there are so many different types of rewards. There's earning golden eggs by, working in the programs. There are different games that you can earn the right to play. In some of our other programs, there's widgets that, add different pieces to them until you get this big reveal, as you earn certain numbers of points. There are things called driving tests, where you play, or you do the one activity, or the one activity. And when you get to the end of it, then you get to play instantly. You get to play a little 1 minute, a little driving game. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Mario Brothers. And so there are different types of rewards, something there for everyone, something that each kid will work for. And then there are different schedules of reinforcement, so that the incentives and the motivations can be effective for everyone as well.
Awesome. Love it. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the impact on the students' reading proficiency and, and their engagement. I mean, when they start using these tools, what do you see that starts happening with their reading proficiency?
Well, I think it largely depends on the classroom practice, really, in terms of what we see. We find that gains are commensurate with the amount of purposeful use. And I say purposeful use. Perhaps, like, for instance, there are some situations where schools or teachers or whoever, they buy programs such as these, and then they just use it as a thing that the kid goes and does whenever they're finished with the work, right? And there's gains for students on that, but the teachers don't get anything from that. But perhaps the most obvious way to measure reading proficiency and the gains is with students who have learning gaps or are struggling readers. That's where you really see the biggest example, although this also applies to the mainstream readers as well. Not only does Reading Eggs, that's what we're talking about right now, provide students and teachers with a comprehensive reading program that, as I mentioned before, includes 4 solutions: 2 for learning to read, 1 for reading to learn, and then 1 for in a fully digitized learning library for nurturing the love of reading. But there are tools that are specifically designed for supporting those struggling readers. There are books in the library that are specifically designed for the needs of students with dyslexia. There are books and series of books in the library that are called high-low readers that are designed for, older readers, older struggling readers, so that it has content, topics, and things like that that would be of interest to an older student, but the reading level is not quite as challenging, which builds up their reading abilities also, thereby, and probably more importantly, builds up their confidence. So we regularly hear from teachers and parents about, how their students crave using the program because of some of the things we've been talking about before, and have therefore made great gains in their learning and have filled those learning gaps. Now, again, our programs, like Reading Eggs specifically, is not necessarily designed to be an intervention tool, although this is where we can really celebrate those great gains. I have a story also. It's actually a neighbor across the street, and her daughter, who's about 12 now, is autistic and was a non-reader, and they had tried everything. And my neighbor had more or less given up on her daughter ever reading. Has had all sorts of different specialists and interventionists, and the school is working with her. She's got this IEP and all this kind of stuff, and never been able to read at all, and never been really interested in it. And she found out that I was involved with Reading Eggs and was inquiring about it. I said, "Tell you what, let's set her up. Let's do it. And what's it going to hurt?" And I said, let's start her with our phonics program, our basic phonics program called Fast Phonics, and let's see what happens. And because of the gamification, because of the incentives and the rewards, and because also it is a program that targets her, that puts her in her zone of proximal development and then works forward. I set her up in November. A little later in the month, her mom reached out to me and said, "Oh my gosh, my daughter for the first time has been wanting to try to read. She saw the first thing in the car the other day, the first word, and said, 'Hey, this is such and such.'" And she said, "It's so exciting to see." She's like, "I'm having to take this away from her so I can get her to go to school," and things like that. And she said, in her IEP, their goal this year is for her to be able to read 10 words. She's going to have those 10 words by Christmas time. And I said, absolutely, absolutely. And then, of course, she's continued on and is continuing to use the program. And that gives me goosebumps, and the mom said, "I wish I had known about this sooner. I would have paid any amount of money for a program like this. I can only, think about all of the time that we've spent doing things that were unsuccessful." And those are the kinds of success stories that we keep close to our hearts, that keep us motivated with what we do, and keep us, really feeling proud about the impact on success and proficiency with our readers. Again, that's a story about an intervention. That's a story about a struggling reader. I'm certainly not meaning to say that it's not also as powerful or as productive for a non-struggling reader. It just really, those, the stories like the one I just told you, those are the ones that, really, make a big impact.
That's cool. I appreciate you sharing that story too. That's, it's so powerful when something can help generate that interest that, where somebody's not wanting to do, or they may have run into a brick wall. I mean, as kids are developing, sometimes they run into a brick wall where it's something's not as interesting, and it creates more of an engagement to start wanting to know some of those tougher words or whatever it is that's, causing them to say, is this really my thing or not? I like that.
She knew that she was struggling, and nobody likes to do the things that they don't do well. And any attempt at teaching her to read, she would just, put her hands up because she didn't feel confident. But by doing it in a gamified way with Fast Phonics, with our Yetis and our fur balls flying around, things like that, it took the fear out of the learning, and, it allowed her to, not be concerned about failure, and, be more concerned about playing the game.
That is awesome. So let's talk about what are, because one of the things you cautioned about is that the tools have to be used correctly. They have to, they can't be something that you send somebody over to just waste time. They'll be quiet while they're doing this or something like that. That's not what its purpose is. What are some of the best practices for educators looking to integrate gamified learning, tools in their literacy curriculum?
Well, I mean, it goes back to what I was just saying, and it's certainly what we encourage our teachers to do, and that's to utilize it purposefully, to utilize it with fidelity. And that means that, they get into the programs and they utilize its ability to assign specific things to students in a differentiated way very easily, to utilize the data that comes from it to make those data-informed decisions. And, really, it's not best practice, but my advice would be to embrace gamification. Look for opportunities to provide students with that Super Mario effect. It's not fluff, and sometimes we have to, in my generation, I learned without having to, have song and dance and all that kind of stuff. Well, really, you learn better, and so why not use this best practice? And we weren't digital natives at that time. So look for opportunities to provide students with that Super Mario effect. And these programs have their place, not just as extra practice, but as the cornerstone of their literacy programs. And not to feel bad about, the fact that teaching is a hard job and often asks more of us than one individual can provide without assistance. And that's what these programs provide us as well. So it's great for the students and it's excellent for their learning and the risk taking. And it also can, take a little bit off of the teacher's plate as well. And that's why we encourage them to use them with fidelity so that they get the most out of it that they possibly can. And the more that the teachers are getting benefits, it's the same kind of thing, the more interested they are in providing those opportunities for their students.
Very cool. So does it generate like reports that the teacher can look at? So it's individualized that way. So
absolutely. It's individualized, or they can look at things as a whole class. It breaks it down and says, okay, here are the relative strengths, here are the relative weaknesses of the whole class or of the individual student. The students don't know it when they're in the programs and they're attempting their activities and they get things wrong or what have you. No big deal is made in the program, but in the reporting, it does show, the student got through this activity and they, got a score of such and such, so that the teachers can then see, again, where the strengths, where the weaknesses are, where do they want to go back in and help fill some gaps and things like that. So there's lots of, I would say of the 3 products, we have a product called Mathletics that does an amazing job of providing instant feedback that at a glance, a teacher can then look and see, okay, because of what they did in this program, now I know this is the group of kids that I need to pull and do some individual work with. This is the group of kids that I want to challenge to go back and try that same activity again. And this is the group that has already mastered it, and I can give them, some an advanced activity or something, an enrichment, and just like that, bam, 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 they're ready to do that.
Cool. So I'm curious. You said that Mathletics, is that one that was called?
Yeah, that one's called Mathletics. Yeah.
And then there's Reading Eggs, and so you said there are 3. What's the third one?
Math Seeds. And so Reading Eggs and Math Seeds are sister products. So they have the very same look and feel. Reading Eggs is designed for kindergarten, pre-K, all the way through, say, grade 6. And some schools are even using it for grade 7 and 8. And some of them are realizing the benefit of having even older struggling readers go back and use, at least the phonics part of Reading Eggs. And then Math Seeds is designed for kindergarten to grade 3. It is a really student-friendly, engaging, fun, cute program. And what I love about it is we know that, It's in those grades K1, 2, where kids decide, oh, I'm a math person or I'm not a math person. And this program being so positive and so encouraging really sets the stage for those kids to say, hey, yeah, I can do this. And then Mathletics is a different type of program. It's designed for kindergarten all the way up through high school. And it, again, it's a different type of program. It's got a whole different set of incentives and motivations and a different kind of reporting system. All three of them make teachers differentiation wizards, magicians, I like to say. With a few clicks of a button, everybody's getting what they need based on their levels, which, to do that without a digital support can take teachers hours and hours of prep time to be able to do. So that's what I get really excited about when I talk to teachers about these programs.
That's awesome. I love it. It really is telling as you're talking about the learners, and as long as it's used the way it's meant to be used, that I would think it really impacts diverse learning styles, the diverse learners that are in that classroom. Any thoughts about that?
Well, it helps even the playing field a little bit. It's also very inclusive because if students are doing classroom type things and the teacher is differentiating, it becomes painfully obvious, who is the stronger group, who is the weaker group, that sort of thing. With the digital platforms and the differentiated programs, nobody really knows, who's getting what. If I've got a grade 5 class, but I've got a handful of students who are doing grade 3 type curriculum activities, nobody knows. Even the student doesn't have to know that they're getting material that's on a lower level. So it's that inclusivity, it's that building of the confidence. It's not, and it's enabling kids to, or disabling kids from saying, well, I'm stupid, so I don't know how to do this.
That's so powerful. Just to be able to make those words go away. All right.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. I gotta think that, I'm glad you shared a little bit more about your background, because I gotta think some of those experiences that you've had and those other degrees and the kids with those severe struggles and such really kind of pay off in understanding the impact that this gamification can have on all children, I guess, is where I'm going with this. But I think that kind of gives you a little, I guess a little more in the game there, not to create a pun or anything, but understand how kids are, why they would be successful, I guess is where I'm going with that. And especially those who might have really had a lot of frustrating events stop them from wanting to even think about learning.
Yeah. Or to run from it, or to run afraid. Yeah, for sure.
So much so. All right. So talk about where you think the future of gamified learning is going to. What do you see it down the road? What's going to happen here?
Well, Dr. Mileto, I'd have to get out my crystal ball at this point. That's really a hard one. As you know, technologies are developing so fast that it's hard to predict. But based solely on what's out there right now, I would say that gamified learning, it's very exciting, really. Gamified learning is going to increase in its use of virtual reality. My daughter recently got, an Oculus VR headset, and oh my gosh, the potential of what could be learned through an immersive experience like what you see with VR is incredible. And I know, this is not something that has not happened yet. It's starting to happen, but I think there will be a greater influence of VR. And then, of course, certainly AI. Students are going to be experts with the technologies when they enter school now, and digital tools in the classroom are going to be as ubiquitous as pens and pencils, are now. And, the evolution, again, it's difficult, especially with technologies, because we have folks who are in the classroom who are my age and weren't digital natives coming in. We have that kind of mid-range where they had started to really embrace technologies. And soon, again, there will be kids who would be completely lost if technologies weren't incorporated into what they were doing, everything that they're doing. And so we have to embrace that change, and we have to not be afraid of it. I know with AI, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear based on how we see education and how we do education right now. It's just going to force us to think outside of the box. It's going to force us well, I mean, again, it forces us to innovate and to think differently about education, and that's not a bad thing. So I think that the future is based on what I know now, and tomorrow some new technology might come out, and I go, oh, okay, well, this is the future. But based on what I know now, I think those are the things that we want to pay close attention to, and be ready and excited to embrace more and more in the classrooms.
That's so cool, and you're so right. It's one of those things that I know it's a terrible question to try and figure out, because one day we're doing this, and the next day we're doing that, and I remember fondly the TI-35 or whatever that number was, and we're so far beyond that, and I've got I carry this thing around called a phone, and that has the ability to do all that stuff. And now I can actually ask questions and say, hey, because I'm terrible at doing tips and stuff like this. Not giving tips. I'm terrible at figuring out what the tip should be. If it's 18%, if it's 20, what does that look like? And my kids are always saying, Dad, we told you how to figure this out in your head. And I'm like, yeah, but I got my phone. Put away your phone, Dad. That's, so now I can actually ask it without telling anybody that I'm, anyway.
You don't even have to type it anymore. You can just ask it. It's,
exactly.
And Siri responds, or whoever.
Exactly.
Alexa or whoever. I'm not plugging any programs.
Nice.
or any products.
So one of the things I have to say is that you made me think about this, because at one time there was this movie that it's called 2001: Space Odyssey. It's made in the 60s, and it has, my favorite part of that movie is this whole section with the astronaut and Dave. I mean, the astronaut is Dave, and then there's Hal, who is the computer, and Hal decides whether the humans are going to be allowed to live or not. And they were imagining in those days, because the computer was becoming a big thing and all that sort of stuff, and so they were imagining, well, now we've kind of come full cycle to where hopefully, Hal is a good person and is a good AI, and not wanting to make people expire, but actually is controlling different functions like surgeries and stuff like this that are going on. That's where it is amazing, and that it's not imaginary anymore, that you could be having a conversation with it through the programs and such, as it's taking care of everything from heart operations to eyes and things like that. So just amazing where we're going. So yes, I do know that in a heartbeat we could be talking about this right now, and next thing you know is we got something else happening within 2 days or something like that.
That's right. That's right.
Good stuff. So, all right. So, as we finish up, one of the things that I started off talking about is that we were going to talk about how gamified learning is changing the reading landscape. So, what are your last thoughts about that?
I know we're talking specifically about reading, and that's definitely the case. But in terms of just education in general, I just I just want people to take away from this conversation that gamified learning is designed to keep kids engaged, to keep them motivated, which is the key to education. But beyond that, I think the benefits of actual gamified learning, I mean, any kind of novelty can do the engagement and the motivational piece, but the gamified piece has the potential to have that Super Mario effect, has that potential to remove that fear of failure, or reframe failures into opportunities, and have kids wanting to continue to try. It's a natural thing to continue to try. With the growth mindset, those students with the growth mindset see challenges as opportunities. Don't see challenges as, oh, this means I'm not smart. They see challenges as, oh, okay, well, if I try harder or if I do this differently, then I can be successful. And that's what kids, when they're gaming, that's exactly what they're doing. And so we want kids to embrace the growth mindset. And I think with gamification, we can really help them do that.
Awesome. Love it. As we're closing out here, I got a couple more questions I want to ask you, but where can our listeners go to learn more about reading eggs and other gamified learning solutions provided by 3P Learning?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. First, obviously going to our website, 3plearning.com, where, you can learn about our amazing literacy, our Reading Eggs program, and our 2 numeracy solutions. And of course, other programs are on the horizon as well. And that will still be in the numeracy or the literacy area. We have a section also for our professional learning that is related to our products, as well as just pedagogical learning as well, and that can be on our website. So, please take a look and reach out to us. There are a number of different ways that you can reach out to us through live chat, through email, through phone calls, what have you, and let us show you a little bit about what we're doing.
Awesome. And I'll have the information with the links in my show notes, so it'll be easy for the listeners to find you. So good stuff. So I got 2 questions I like to ask my guests. And first one goes like this. How do you keep going when so much is going on that you may want to quit?
In times like that, and I will say that when you say you want to quit, at first I thought of it in terms of quitting being your occupation, but it could be quitting in terms of anything, whether it's a hobby or a relationship or what have you. But in those times where I feel like I want to quit, I really try to focus on practicing gratitude, reminding myself of the things in my job or in my relationship or in my whatever the situation is that I love. And I just bathe in those for a while. And that helps me realize that whatever this thing is that's, giving me a little bit of, heartburn, is generally a small thing in comparison to the positives in whatever the situation is. And that really helps me to refocus. Certainly if I'm in a crisis situation or in a situation where I'm particularly busy or what have you, and I feel a little overwhelmed, you do the things like you stop and, prioritize and all of that. But I think, also the practicing of the gratitude also helps with changing of the mindset as well. I remember this is straying a little bit from what you said in terms of when you want to quit. But, I remember one time I was working and I was really verbalizing how frustrated I was because I had this task that I wanted to get done. And I kept getting interruptions, teachers coming or people coming and needing different things. And someone very wise that I worked with kind of turned to me and said, it's just when you think that you can't get your job done for all the interruptions and all the distractions and all the pulls, you realize that the interruptions and the distractions and the pulls are your job. And that really kind of reframed it for me. So sometimes those things that I think, that get me down and get me frustrated or what have you, I need to realize that those are things that I'm here for. That's what I'm here for. And it's that conversation, it's that side piece that you take or what have you that sometimes makes the most impact and sometimes is the most important part of what we're doing.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Last question. Do you have a teacher in your past who made a difference in your life? If so, who was it? And what would you say if given the chance to say thank you?
Oh, yes. To my 6th grade teacher, Miss Langenberg. You made an indelible mark on me. You filled me with confidence, and I loved you, and I loved school as a result. And I think that's one of the biggest compliments that a teacher can ever get. I have students who, come back and reach out to me and talk about, my impact on them. As a matter of fact, in my past in professional development, I did a lot with classroom management and things like that. And I used to ask teachers to think back to their elementary teachers. And so these are adults, and I'm asking them to think back to their elementary teachers. And most of them can recall their primary teachers, their kindergarten teachers. And from there, I remind them that this proves to them that their students are going to remember them. They have no control over that. But what they do control is what their students remember them for. And that's why Miss Langenberg was so important to me, because I remember her for making me feel confident, for making me feel successful. And I also really love it when students reach out to me and they say, hey, you did this thing that impacted me. And sometimes it's things I don't even remember I said or that I did. And that's the really important thing to remember, is everything that we say and do in the classroom or every interaction with our students is our opportunity to set our legacy with those students.
That's cool. I love it. Thank you so much. Matter of fact, you got me thinking about some of my elementary teachers right now. I like that. That's cool. Sheila, thank you so much for sharing how gamified learning is changing the reading landscape in K-12 education. What a cool focus, and enjoyed talking with you about all the stuff you got going on. Wishing you the best in all you do.
Thank you so much. And it's been so much fun just to kind of think about gamification and to think about, even this last question that you asked me. It feels good to go back and reflect. So thank you for the opportunity.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.